Baseball season is here. Steven Andros from thelines.com, joined by our senior writer, Mo Nawara. In this video, we will be looking at one of the advanced metrics in baseball, why it's important, and how Mo applies it to his handicapping, not only of games, but potentially of futures markets as well. And the stat we are going to be talking about today is the popular addition for pitchers among sabermetrics, FIP. So first question, Mo, for those that don't know, what is FIP?
So FIP stands for, and it's FIP, if people don't know, fielding independent pitching. And basically what it's trying to do is isolate what's under the pitcher's control rather than like factoring in basically balls in play that are kind of subjected to a lot of variance, defense, randomness, a lot of these factors impact like what happens when a baseball hits a bat, which is pretty much proven to be something close to random. I mean, most hitters don't have that much effect, although they do have a little bit, and most pitchers have even less effect is basically what people have figured out. So FIP is just an attempt to more fully isolate the pitcher, and it focuses on the three true outcomes: home runs, strikeouts, and walks, and then also hit by pitches in there as well.
I believe intentional walks are stripped out of that stat as well, right?
Yeah, I think that's true as well.
So I think for new bettors, casual baseball fans, one of the toughest things to understand with all these sabermetrics and advanced statistics, I mean, you can understand what they mean and what their intention is, but if you don't understand the scale, you can't really apply it to your handicapping or betting on games. So for the casual baseball fan out there, give us an idea of like the numerical scale of fielding independent pitching. What is kind of bad, what is average, and what is good?
Yeah, that's definitely something I run into sometimes when I'm looking at stats. Like I'll look at like called strike plus whiffs, and it's like, okay, I see this percent and I kind of have an idea, but I don't really know where it's at, from good to bad sometimes. But that's what makes FIP so easy to use, is basically they've translated it fully to the ERA scale. So whatever you think a good ERA is, a good FIP is the same, basically. So anything under 3 is spectacular. 3 to 4 is like you're pretty solid. Over 4, we're starting to get a little dicey. And then if you're like over 4.5, you're not doing a very good job of run prevention, essentially.
For sure. And just to add further context to that, if you look at the 2021 FIP leaders across Major League Baseball, you'll see that only 9 of them had a FIP under 3.0. So that, again, kind of similar to the ERA scale. The leader, there was only one pitcher with a sub 2 FIP, and that was Corbin Burns. Zach Wheeler's near the top as well. So all these Cy Young candidates and award winners near the top. That Max Scherzer was number 3 there. So obviously some very big names, and you can see why they might be at the top of this scale. And that's what we want to see, right? Like if we're trying to strip out all of this randomness, then the most talented pitchers should rise to the top. And that's pretty much what we see with FIP.
Yeah, and you look at a guy like Corbin Burns, he just didn't walk anybody last year. And when you don't walk anybody and you're striking everybody out, I mean, your FIP is going to be spectacular. So that's why he came in. And that's ultimately what allowed him to win the Cy Young, I think, basically, was he was so good on a per batter basis that the award voters eventually just leaned his way when honestly, some of these other pitchers like Wheeler delivered more total value than him.
For sure. So now let's transition to how you like to apply this, both on a day-to-day basis and also when you're looking at futures markets. And let's look at a day-to-day basis here. When you open up the lines for that day's slate of games and you're looking at the pitching matchups, how much is FIP factoring into your handicap of a game, whether you're looking at sides or totals or maybe even props, strikeout props, et cetera? Give us some insight about how you apply fielding independent pitching.
So honestly, most baseball bettors are pretty aware that the biggest thing is the starting pitcher, right? And that's why the line at a lot of places, basically, you have to lock in the starters if you're going to bet on the game, or you choose not to, and then you kind of are taking your chances, right? That's when you list or you take action on the team no matter what. And that's because the starting pitcher is so important. And FIP is one of the things I look at. I'm looking at, 5 or 6, 7 stats at least, probably, when I'm basically trying to estimate the pitcher's true talent level. What sort of earned run average can I expect him to give up? And just looking at ERA is not really going to do that great of a job, because ERA incorporates those batted balls. It heavily reflects the defense behind the pitcher. And I'm just trying to get a better idea of the pitcher's true talent level. And FIP is going to give me a better look at that than ERA, among many other stats. There's many stats that are very useful. And I'm always looking at a pitcher's FIP every day, pretty much, when I'm looking at every matchup.
And we're going to go through a lot of those other advanced stats here on the Lines and Play Picks YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that here, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. So I do want to ask kind of like a use case example here, and you let me know if I'm being a little too simplistic. So you see a game, and the first thing you're looking at is the starting pitching, and you see that both of the pitchers have, kind of mediocre ERAs, but you see one of the pitchers have a much better FIP. And is that signaling you? It sounds like an obvious question, but I assume that's signaling to you that there's potentially value in those odds if, for whatever reason, they're not matching up with the pitcher who's better with FIP.
Yeah, I'm going to expect that pitcher to most likely have a higher true talent level than the opposing pitcher. But you always need to look at previous years. That's what I always make sure I'm looking at. Like, I'm looking at multiple years in a row, because first of all, FIP is backwards looking. We always have to remember it's telling us what has happened. It's not trying to tell us what will happen. But if you look at the pitcher's FIP and you look at the previous year's FIP, because that's a key factor, you need a larger sample than just what's happened this year. So just try to use it and use multiple years of data to figure out how to help you estimate the pitcher's true talent level. And yeah, most likely, if there's a pitcher with a lower FIP and we have a decent sample, I'm going to expect that to be a more talented pitcher who's going to do a slightly better job getting the other, getting outs than the other pitcher.
Yeah, it's great advice, especially in the early parts of a Major League Baseball season where pitchers are only getting a handful of starts for the first month or so. So let's move forward here. In addition to just standard size and totals on a daily basis, futures markets and how you've applied it in your handicapping and your bets in the past, and how you look to as well do it in the future.
Yeah. So again, look at each pitcher on the staff, multiple years of data. We want to check their FIPS. We want to check these other stats, and try to figure out not only the true talent levels of the pitchers, but what sort of depth they have of like major league viable pitchers. I think there's like a cutoff around, like I said, 4.5. If you don't have depth, multiple other pitchers that have a true talent FIP under 4.5 that you can throw out there in case of multiple injuries, which this is baseball. This is pitching. Pitchers get hurt all the time. So, you look at a guy like, for example, Clayton Kershaw in recent years, great stats across the board, tremendous FIP, close to low 3s. But can we really count on him to make 30 starts? Probably not. It just hasn't been happening. So for a team, you want to give the Dodgers great marks for this, right? But you have to make sure there's a guy with a true talent of maybe, 4.2 or something would be fine. If Kershaw misses 5 starts, this guy is going to come in and just not get blown up, So I think looking at pitching depth is really important, because you never want to say you can predict injuries, but with pitchers, it's guys are going to get hurt.
For sure. And last question here, Mo, before we wrap up, Cy Young markets, right? Like people like to bet the awards markets. At what point do you find yourself typically firing on the Cy Young market, and how much is FIP playing into that handicap?
I think it plays in hugely. So I'm usually looking at Cy markets in the preseason. It's kind of a shot in the dark because, like I said, a lot of injuries with pitchers, and like we talked about with using multiple years of stats. I mean, pitching performance and output. I mean, not necessarily performance, although performance definitely does, but output varies hugely year to year. Even a guy like Max Scherzer, who is basically a machine coming out doing the same thing every year, he's going to experience like half run fluctuations in his ERA very regularly. And that can be massive in the awards voting, right? And I think nowadays you need to factor in FIP hugely. Like we saw that, like I said, with Corbin Burns last year. He basically won because of his fielding independent stats. And I'm looking in the preseason, and I'm usually trying to find a guy that's maybe poised for a breakout, maybe whose FIP is better than his ERA the previous couple years because he had some bad fortune, or he's been pitching in front of some poor defenses maybe. And if things are turning around on that front, he probably is going to be undervalued in the futures markets. Although, you just got to always beware. Tremendous variance with pitchers.
Yeah, I think 2021 was a perfect example of how to apply this and looking for value, right? Like halfway through the season, the statistics and the market both agreed Jacob deGrom was probably going to win this award. And then an injury happened, which you've been talking about at length here in this video, that when an injury happens, it throws the market into a shuffle. And at that point, you need to try and diagnose where the value is. And I remember our conversations at work, Mo, about, okay, deGrom's out. Where's the value now? And we looked at Corbin Burns and we looked at Zach Wheeler, and sure enough, by the end of the year, those two guys were at the top of the FIP rankings, and Burns won the Cy Young. And Wheeler was a really great value play at the time at 25-1, even though he didn't wind up winning the award. You at least would have locked in some equity and potentially a chance to hedge it before the market closed going into the postseason. So a real world example from the 2021 season of how you applied this and I applied this to the NL Cy Young market. So Mo, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I took Wheeler. I remember we talked about this. I took Wheeler. But I did think by the end of the season, I did think Burns should win.
Sure.
But I just had a really good price on Wheeler. But I did think Burns was the best pitcher on a per batter basis. And
most importantly, FIP allowed us to filter out all the other names that were floating near the top of the board that we instantly eliminated of not having a real chance to win the award, which is kind of half the battle at times when you have a favorite get injured and it opens up the market for everybody else. So, Mo, thank you so much for giving us some insight here on fielding independent pitching. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. We're trying to give you as many betting insights as we can, not just picks on a day-to-day basis, but some tutorials as well to how to apply these advanced metrics in baseball as we get going here. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time here on The Lines and Play Picks.